Welcome. You've reached S.J. Thomason, and this is Christian-apologist.com. And today I'm very excited to be here with a deist. He calls himself on Twitter BrassWisdom, and his name's Derek. And Derek, without further ado, and actually before I start, I found out that Derek and I live in the same area. So we're both in the Tampa area in Florida, in the United States, and enjoying this very hot, rainy season. And so he and I are both dealing with that kind of weather and the craziness that goes on in this area at this time of year. So Derek, without further ado, let me go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right. Nice to be on, SJ. Glad to have a talk to you. And yeah, the weather in Florida is notoriously crazy. On one hand, you get the scalding hot weather, and then the next minute you have to protect yourself from a hurricane. It's like you're saying, oh, man, it hasn't rained in 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, it's like the weather. I think the weathermen even give up here.
I know. Well, I think they have a good bet. They just say, hey, there's a 50% chance of rain. I mean, they can't go wrong with that. Yeah. Every day it rains. And they might as well say it's 100% chance because every single day it's rained for, 50%, I don't know, the whole summer.
Yeah, 50% to one person's 100% to another.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I even see things where it'll say there's, 20% chance of rain, and I get on my bike, and within moments, there's a downpour. And,
oh, yeah, that's happened to me before. It's like, where I would literally go out, like, because I walk, and I walk to get some exercise, and what I'll say is like, oh, it looks very sunny out today. I think I can have a good stroll. And then, I get out of my house, I go halfway down the block, and then all of a sudden it just starts pouring rain, like, right then and there. I'm like, damn, that was bad.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, the weather is notoriously crazy here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to come. It's good to come on your show and talk to you about stuff.
Yeah, it's good you're on. I'm glad you came on. In fact, you asked me to come on, so I'm glad that you made that initiative.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been wanting to talk to more people lately. Ever since I've been wanting to talk for a long time. I actually made the initiative of wanting to talk to Godless Cranium, talked to him before. And yeah, I just been wanting to broaden, the people I talk to and start engaging in more discussions.
That's good. So let's go ahead and start on I know one of the reasons that you and I have met on Twitter, and we've seen each other in these YouTube chats sometimes. And I know that you said that you found me through Max Colby and his channel, and you and I have both been on different people's channels. Like you said, you were on Godless Cranium, and I've been on Geek Room and some associated atheist channels, very related to the ones you've been on. Now, you say you define yourself as a deist who was raised as a Christian. So can you share with us how that came about?
Yes, it was like I was brought up in a non-denominational Christian household for most of my life. We were so liberal that I actually, we never read the Bible or anything like that, or even went to church except a handful of times. And so I grew up very in a sort of Christian background where it was funny because my knowledge on the Bible was so bad that I actually did not even know about the Old Testament. I assumed the entire Bible was just a long story about Jesus. It wasn't until later on, actually, until after I got out of Christianity that I actually read the Bible more. And, I found it more interesting than what I've been led to believe. And what happened is like after I would say, I don't know, I had periodically had doubts for most of my life given, some of my personal experiences. It wasn't until I had a very what people would define as a spiritual experience, which sort of got me where it really bothered me that I was a non-denominational Christian. I was saying, oh my God, everyone has a denomination. I said, I should go out and try to find a denomination. And I eventually did settle on Methodist for a while. Although, funny enough, I never actually ended up going to a Methodist church, even though I wanted to. It just the stars didn't align for that. And what happened eventually is due to a combination of, I mean, what's funny is that like a lot of atheists will go on and say that, oh, they read up on church history or they read up on books and stuff and science and they came to reason, you know, and they left religion because of that. I mean, like when I read into history, the church history, and I really read into it, I had no like intention of disproving Christianity or anything like that. It was more or less, you know, I wanted to learn history and I wanted to better inform myself about my beliefs. And I eventually read into the neuroscience as well. I read a couple papers on that. And eventually I just realized that I wasn't a Christian anymore. Because I just, you know, I didn't believe in the central doctrines. I just couldn't believe them anymore. And I desperately tried for a long time to believe it, but I could not. Eventually, I became sort of like, I never really denied God's existence, but I more or less became like sort of a strong agnostic, where I was more or less likely, I was saying, oh, just don't ask me about it. Like, I don't want to talk about God's existence or nothing like that. I don't know, neither do you. Stuff like that. I became sort of like a strong agnostic where, you know, I just said we can't know that. And eventually, I began reading up on the founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and I got into deism from that, and then I read into Voltaire and Thomas Paine. And eventually, over time, I found that they made a compelling case, in my view. For one, about my view on seeing Christianity, and two, for my view on seeing God. And, you know, I've read up on some philosophers who gone in the more deistic route, and there's actually surprisingly not a lot of the time when I have to look in the philosophy of deists, I have to go back hundreds of years.
Okay, so that's fair enough. I think you have given us a little bit of a history. Now, you did share with me that you're 22, so you're pretty young. But you came to this decision to move away from Christianity. You said it started right around the age of 17, right?
17 to 18, I would say, is like when I was really just starting to just get out of it. I would say I probably realized I wasn't a Christian like fully nonstop, where I was just like maybe at around 20 I would say was like the latest. I would say is when I was just done. So I've been a deist.
So let me ask you. Oh, sorry.
Oh, so I've been like a deist for maybe about 2 years.
Okay, so when did you? Okay, so about 2 years you've been a deist. Now, how do you actually? Let me ask you this, because I might have the wrong definition of deism. I have my own definition, but I'm going to first find out how you define deism, and then we'll compare what my definition is, and maybe I'm off on your interpretation. So, how do you define deism?
Well, I mean, as a deist, a lot of people actually get confused about the distinction between deism and theism, when really it's like William Lane Craig described it, like in his debate with Christopher Hitchens. Deism is theism. It's theism is just the belief in God, and deism is merely a subset of that, where it's considered a natural religion, where deists like myself, we go mainly on general revelation, you would say, through nature. I believe I have from a deist website where they laid out a much better definition than I could probably give on it. But they believe, but as I believe in God, as I believe in an external creative force that is responsible for the universe existence and all the laws and complexities that make it.
Okay, so let me. I want to clarify this whole position that you have, because I want to make sure I'm on the right page now. Theism, as we know, theism is the belief that there is a supreme power. Christianity is a belief that there is a supreme power, and the supreme power has a personal relationship to us. So he's both transcendent, according to Christianity, meaning that God is outside of time, space, and matter, outside of the universe, and he's also concurrently within the universe. He's concurrently immanent. That's the idea from Christianity in the theistic perspective. Deism, with my understanding, is that, yes, according to deism, God did create the universe. And at one point, God was outside of the universe in the transcendent form, creating the universe. Then, according to this position, as far as my interpretation, God then stepped into the universe, sort of blended himself into nature and disappeared from. I mean, there's just a natural passive relationship between a higher power and people who believe in deism. Is that correct?
I would say, like, deists, like myself, I personally believe, like, God does not really intervene. A lot of deists, we just simply just don't believe in miracles and stuff. Deism has had a weird history, which I learned about through reading about David Hume, because that was a big rage all in his day.
Sure, I love David Hume.
And, you know, I was reading in, like, some deists, the only distinction between them and Christians was the fact they didn't believe the Bible was inerrant. They pretty much agreed on everything else about the qualities of God and everything.
Okay, well, what do you think? Do you think that God is, do you think that God is now, because I think in the deist perspective, God is supposed to be impersonal.
Oh, yeah.
Correct?
I mean, for me personally, I don't believe, I have heard some arguments from I think he's a theologian or a philosopher, either one, John Hicks, I believe, who did make a case on epistemic distance, where it was I read about it in this deistic evolution book, and basically the point would be is like with the epistemic distance is that God has chosen to remove himself from human activity in order to allow human freedom. And now I do believe maybe God has a reason for not really being as personal as, like, I would say Christians would want him to be. I would say maybe not for moral reasons, granted, but I mean, I would be open to an argument for that position. Like, if a philosopher were to make a better case for it in the deistic perspective, I'd be open to hearing it. But yeah, I don't personally believe, like, that God really intervenes.
But you do seem to believe that he's separate. I mean, he's not just nature, because there's the pantheistic belief that believes the idea for pantheism is that God is part of nature. Nature and God are one.
Yeah.
So
like,
it's the immanent belief that God is immanent within this universe, and he's also part of the universe.
Oh yeah. I mean, pantheists believe that the universe and nature are basically the same thing.
Right.
I actually had some pantheist friends who had somewhat of an argument for that. I didn't come to believe them on that, because I just came to the sun and realization. I was like saying, well, I mean, if the universe and God are the same, like, we already have a word for the universe. And so I couldn't really get in. I could never wrap my head around that idea anyway. So, but
well,
yeah,
let me ask you this.
I mean, I personally believe that God is all transcendent. That's what the deists have always really held to, is the transcendent nature of God.
Okay, so you believe that the transcendence means that God is outside of time, space, and matter. So you would say that that's a fair. Okay, so he's outside, but he's not also immanent. He's not also inside time, space, and matter. Correct?
Yeah, he's just not personal.
Okay, so he's impersonal, outside of God. Now, see, that is, just so you know, that's also equivalent to the Muslim faith. They believe that Allah is transcendent. However, Allah is not someone you can know personally. He's a transcendent and aloof God, according to the Muslim faith.
Yeah, I actually know a little bit about Islam too, and yeah, that is correct. Although there's a lot of I never bought into Islam. I never probably will ever, but yeah, I mean, there's just a lot more problems with Islam than just their version of God. But I
So
believe also, but I also believe the Jewish God has been sort of seen like classic Judaism. I would say today sort of believes the same thing, except they do believe like God interacts like through miracles and like with Moses and the Red Sea.
right, right. So Jews definitely do believe in the idea that God is personal, though, because God, according to Jews, God basically chose them. They're the chosen people, and God worked through them to bring his laws into the world through Mosaic law.
Yeah,
So,
I believe like Ben Shapiro actually. I don't know if you know who Ben Shapiro is.
yeah, I know the name, but I know that's also a very common Jewish name. So if you explain that, that'd be great.
He's like a political advocate. He's also an Orthodox Jew. And he went into why he didn't believe in Jesus and stuff like that. I mean, he believes Jesus was a person, but he doesn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. He just said it was he just didn't believe he couldn't wrap his mind around the whole Trinity concept.
That's a good point. So is that maybe that should bring us to another part of the conversation in how since you were raised a Christian and at some point you did at least nominally believe in the idea of Jesus. How did you decide that Jesus is not? How did you decide that didn't make sense to you? What decision did you make, or what happened in your life, or was there a moment when you said this can't be true, or how did it happen?
It was actually pretty funny. Like what happened with me is like I said, I didn't go into studying Christianity or nothing for the idea of disproving it, or even to really go against what I believed in, because I wanted to be more up to date. I wanted to expand my mind and learn more about what I believed in. I also, I got into reading guys like Bart Ehrman, and and I've read up on people like atheists like Tim O'Neill, who isn't a biblical scholar, but I've read up some of their points that they have brought up, and I also just more or less got the neuroscience was probably what got me more than anything else, because it was just funny enough because I just sort of came to there's some deists that do believe in the afterlife, just as there is some atheists that actually do as well. They might believe in reincarnation or whatever. Personally, I don't. But although I will say that's one thing I would be glad to be wrong about.
Okay, let me actually that brings us to a good point. So that is one way that you can also distinguish yourself from pantheists, because a lot of pantheists believe in reincarnation and the idea of a constant cycle of regeneration.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about the pantheist faith is they also believe the universe is eternal. It's been eternally in these cycles of regeneration. And so the idea that your life just keeps going back farther and farther, there's an infinite regression in a way, because if it's an eternal universe, where's the start point? They talk about regeneration, but they don't talk about when did you initially get started here, and exactly when did the first you, before you've been regenerated and reincarnated a number of times, when did that happen? So that's a question I think that might be in the minds of some pantheists.
Well, yeah, with the whole reincarnation question always got to me is like, the whole point of reincarnation would be to have your own life. Like, I'm dead one minute and then the next minute I'm like in a monkey or something. And
it doesn't sound very enjoyable, does it? Because you don't have any control. Like you don't know, you don't know if you lived your life correctly. You could wake up in the body of a cow for all you know. You don't know.
That would it's
a sentient being. It's another sentient being.
In the Hindu tradition, that'd be a great thing to be, is like born into a cow.
Yeah, a sacred cow. You don't have to worry about being eaten.
Yeah, in India, there's no McDonald's in India.
Oh, there are. There's McDonald's in India, but the food there, they don't serve beef. So they're very wise that way. They serve lots of veggie burgers and other sorts of.
Well, they're smart business. They know their market. Yeah. And although funny enough, the lettuce is the beef is probably more healthy than the lettuce is.
I'm sure the beef is, if you think about beef, like really good beef coming out of Japan, Kobe beef or something, it's very, very delicious. Those cows are, massaged, they're given the good life, and then unfortunately they're slaughtered.
Oh yeah, I mean,
let me ask you this, Derek, because this kind of going back to your position. Now you've said a few things that I want to get back to. One thing that you said, and I think that I want to see if we can come to an agreement on, is looking at your whole perception of how the whole universe began. So how would you say, I mean, are you an advocate, or do you embrace or endorse or support the idea of the Big Bang Theory, for example?
Yeah. I mean, that's where all the scientific evidence comes towards, is the Big Bang.
So how in a deist perspective, how does a deist look at the Big Bang? How do you put together the God that you believe in and the Big Bang? How does that work?
Well, I mean, with deists, like, more or less, we believe that would just be a mechanism that God uses to create the universe.
But God is active, right? So there's an active God prior to the creation of the universe, prior to 13.8 billion years ago. Is that fair to say?
I mean, in a way, if you're going to define it as like a creative fiat, like, where he creates the universe, and yeah, in a way that would be active. But, like, when deists say, like, impersonal, we tend to just mean that in the sense that God just does not, like, do miracles. He does not, like, intervene in the world. He created the world. Like, a deist would probably say the only miracle that God did was create the universe.
So, okay, because I'm honestly, I've never talked to a deist, so I want to make sure I get your point correct.
Oh, yeah,
I want to understand this whole thing correctly. So if I were, like, for example, if I were going to write a blog on deism, and I wanted to explain how the universe began, deists, they're fine with the idea of the Big Bang.
Yeah.
And that God somehow had a mechanism or played some part in the start of the universe. That's fair?
Yeah. I mean, deists and Christians both agree on the fact that God created the universe. It just mainly comes down to interpretation and what does God do.
Okay.
That's mainly where I differ from a lot of Christians on. There's, like, a lot of times I often see, like, in my own personal, I know not all Christians do it, so, I don't want to generalize too much. But, in my experience with Christians, like, they tend to attribute, like, their own emotions to God. They humanize God to an extent. And that's something that that does revolt a deist in a way, because we sort of see God as transcendent, and we don't like the idea of, like, humanizing him so much to the point where he just becomes a human.
Which is Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what we would, that's what deists would disagree with Christians. What's actually funny is that deists, although there is some warrant for it, where it's why I left the deist community myself, because I found that they were pretty much anti-theists. They just happened to believe in God. Because, they were all into bashing on Christians and Muslims and stuff like that, and I was just like, nah, I'm not into that. And so I got out of the community for those reasons.
The atheist community, right?
That was the deist community.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so you got out of the deist. Okay.
So I got out of the deist community because they were very harsh on Christianity and on Muslims and just religious people in general. And I mean, I just never got it because, like, because I have family that's Christians, I have friends that are Muslims, and I just never got all the hatred that I seen out of it. And they would use Thomas Paine writing in order to justify their treatment. But I mean, it was just stupid to me, because even Thomas Paine himself, even though he was very vitriolic and going against the Christianity and the church in his time, even he said that he thought Jesus was a great moral character. Like, in his book Age of Reason, he says, he basically gives, like, a warning and says, please note, like, nothing I said is to discredit the teachings of Jesus Christ. I think he's a great moral character, but I think he's been perverted over time by people.
Let's build off that for a second, because I'm very curious to hear your views on that. So, are you familiar with C.S. Lewis's trilemma?
Yeah, the liar, lunatic, and Lord.
Do you know, and I know some atheists have added the idea of legend. So they said there's a four-pack there. They think it's a quadlemma, I guess you could say. But
that goes to Bart Ehrman.
Right, right. So I want to go back and look at that. If we could just look at that for a second, because if you say that Thomas Paine said that Jesus was a great moral character, I think that's consistent with the way that some Jewish people and some Muslim people view Christ as a great moral character or a prophet in some way. Muslims see him as a prophet. So what? Let me ask you this. Do you know why C.S. Lewis thought that you have to make a choice out of those three, according to Lewis?
Because I know a lot about C.S. Lewis, funny enough, because going into Christianity, that's a constant thing that my Christian friends always bring up, say, read C.S. Lewis here, read C.S. Lewis here. And I said, the first thing that always popped up was the Chronicles of Narnia.
I love that, but that's old. I mean, that's C.S. Lewis children's books.
Yeah, I know, and that would be the first thing that would pop up to me, and then I'd say, oh wait, they want me to read his Christian books.
Yeah, and Mere Christianity is the one that we would want you to read.
Yeah, so I was saying, well, I know C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia are a good book, but I'm saying, like, why are all my Christian friends recommending him? I said, oh wait, I get it now, but yeah, I did read up on him. Basically, he said if he was a liar because either he meant what he said, or he was lying about it. He was a lunatic in the sense where he meant it, but he actually wasn't it. So he was like a raving madman.
Yeah, so that's what C.S. Lewis is saying. So he's looking at the fact that Jesus said, I think it was 82 or 83 times in the New Testament, in the Gospels, Jesus said, I am the Son of Man. So the reference, according to Jews, to call himself the Son of Man is even more significant than saying the Son of God, because that has references into the book of Daniel with the Son of Man coming from the clouds of heaven, sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One. So I'm wondering, if he says he's the Son of Man and he's forgiving all of these people for their sins. I don't go around forgiving my husband. I can forgive someone a sin against me, but forgiving people for the sins that they commit against others, I think that was the significant point that C.S. Lewis wanted to make. So those sorts of things he did.
Yeah. I have read some Muslims commentary on that, and some Jewish commentaries who've read it too as well. It's like when they say that Jesus offered prayers, they would say that he's talking about God, and actually he was saying that only God can do it. It wasn't making a reference to himself being God.
That's what they say. Now, if you actually read the New Testament, though, you'll see that Jesus made it quite clear that it's, he actually used a parable where he referred to himself as the one who was killed as the son of the God in the parable. He was the son of the garden person. And there's other references that Jesus made. Like, for example, you'll see the Son of Man coming in the cloud of heaven. He made a very specific reference to the Pharisees of himself being Christ, being the God. And that's the reason why the Pharisees tore their shirts across and said, we're going to go ahead and crucify him. They made it quite clear they did it because they said he was blaspheming. And to blaspheme basically means you're saying you're the Son of God, which is what Jesus did. He wasn't saying he was just a son of God. We're all sons and daughters of the Lord.
Oh, yeah, that was a constant. That's what I get on a lot of Christians, because they'll point out to me all these verses where Jesus said he's the Son of God.
Well, he said Son of Man. He always referred to himself as the Son of Man.
Well, they'll show me stuff like that, and I'll show them that you do know that a lot of, like, when that was a common thing that Jews often sometimes referred to themselves as, because, like, the Son of God. Because to a Jewish person that heard the phrase Son of God, they would just see that as, oh, you're saying that you're a Jew. You're the chosen race of people. You're God's children. So that would be like Jesus saying that he was the Son of God in that sense.
Well, he didn't, though. I have to correct you, Derek. He actually said he's the Son of Man. He said it over 80 times in the New Testament, that he is the Son of Man. He didn't say the Son of God. There's no reference that Jesus said, I'm the Son of God. He said the Son of Man.
I think maybe David Woods, I think he's another Christian apologist who said something like that. Maybe that's where I'm getting it from. Maybe I have corrected David Woods on on some Muslim interpretations he's had, because I've read up some commentaries on Muslims in the Quran. So I mean, I could be mistaken if he's read up on it.
I like David Wood. I think he's funny. Do you listen to a lot of his videos?
Oh yeah, I do. I loved his Islamicize Me.
Yeah,
series.
Those are funny.
I did. I love that very much. But yeah, I mean, what I really can't, like, the reason why I would never become a Muslim is because I really just cannot believe the idea that Jesus did not die on the cross.
Yeah, they're saying that some other, I mean, that's a very good point, because Muslims say that God took Jesus away before he was crucified. So the impression that a lot of Muslims are left with is that, does that mean that some other guy took his place and said nothing to Pontius Pilate? And I mean, and no one recognized that this was some stranger who was taking his place. I mean, it's just kind of strange that that people look at that and they don't realize, I mean, that's the one fact in Christianity that actually is our foundation. It's the resurrection. If that didn't happen, Christianity is nothing. I mean, it's nothing without the resurection.
Well, yeah, I know. And like, but I mean, what's funny about the whole claim is like, I mean, it just seems far out to me. It seems like a bit more far out than the idea of God resurrecting, because I mean, ultimately you have to be saying is like God used a replacement for Jesus. So I mean, was this man innocent for the crime? And so would God crucify an innocent man and have him die so his prophet would go to be risen like Elijah? So I mean, it would just, and not just that, is like, so you mean for about, I don't know what the time span between Muhammad and Jesus is, but you would mean like for what, hundreds of years, like they allowed their documents to be completely corrupted, and you know, and no Christian to understand like what you know, so we don't have any early traces of anything that resembles what Muslims would believe about Jesus' resurrection and stuff.
No, we don't. It's. I mean, even Jewish people admit that Jesus himself was resurrected. I mean, Jesus himself was crucified, I should say. Jewish people will say, yes, Jesus was crucified, and it's written in the Talmud, for example. There's evidence of that sort of thing occurring. The big question that Jewish people have is did he resurrect? They don't believe he resurrected. They just believe he was crucified.
Well, yeah. I believe I can't remember his. Vern Games, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. I don't want to say Vern Gagne because that's a wrestler, but he's a late Jewish scholar who, he used to be a Catholic, I believe, but then he converted to Judaism. And, you know, and even he says, like, he said that there's no doubt that, you know, Jesus was crucified. And this is like, you know, even the atheist scholars give that to Christians, is like they don't doubt that Jesus was actually crucified by Pontius Pilate. Most of them. You have ones like Richard Carrier, who. Well, he's not a biblical scholar.
Yeah, he's a deep end.
Yeah, he's an ancient history historian.
Right. He's like Greek is actually his specialty.
Yeah. So I mean.
So let me ask you this. So you said, okay, so. Going back to the beginning of our conversation, one thing that you said that I found interesting right off the bat is you said you had some spiritual experiences, and I'm curious if you would be willing to share those. Or maybe it was just one experience, but what happened that you said that you would call that something that is not explainable in natural terms?
Well, I mean, I had sort of like this spiritual experience when I was sort of, I don't know if I was, I mean, I've always had doubts, but I mean, that was this spiritual experience, like what people would call a spiritual experience. I sort of doubt it today, but like basically, I've written on my Facebook about it, where I more or less trying to think. I kept seeing the number 316 pop up in my life. I had no idea what it referenced because, you know, I never read the Bible and stuff. And, you know, every day I would continually get 316 coming at me from all angles, where I would I would go by a building and it would have like 316 as like an address, or it had I'd wake up and it'd be 3:16 a.m. or 3:16 p.m. or something like that. So this number kept reoccurring in my life, and eventually, one time I had the Bible. I wasn't reading it, but I was just picking it up, and it fell on the ground and it landed on 3:16 on John 3:16.
John 3:16. Ah.
And that happened the first time, and I just said, this must be a coincidence. And so I just picked up the book, I put it down, and this kept on happening. And eventually the signs sort of wore off where I didn't notice them as much. But then they just came back again and again. And eventually what happened is like, I don't know what happened. I got really mad one day, and I just ended up grabbing the Bible and throwing it at the wall because it just happened to be in my vicinity. It fell on the ground, and once again, it landed at John 3:16. And so I read that. So I eventually just said, I'll just read that a little bit. And so I read that. I was like, okay, well, and then...
Wait. Do you remember what that says? Just in case people who are listening don't know what that says.
I mean, I got like I got like a copy on me with let's see.
So it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, for whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life."
Yeah. So, that constantly kept coming up to me. And eventually, one final time, like, the book fell open to John 3:16. And I was like, I read it, and it was like, eventually I had this, it's hard to describe sort of emotion, like, because I was going through some personal stuff in my life. And I read that, I fell asleep, and I just kept thinking in my mind. And eventually I had like this epiphany. And right when it happened, it was like I had this epiphany about my life, and it was 3:16 a.m. And I felt like this, it's hard to describe, but it had this like strong, like being grabbed, but like not having a hand or anything by you. Like, I would say, like, where you feel like you're being personally yanked. And I had that sort of experience where I just felt like I was being personally yanked. And I didn't know what it was from, but it felt like uplifting. It felt good. And, people classify that as a spiritual experience.
If that happened to me, I probably would take that pretty seriously. I don't think I would not take it not seriously. I've had some instances not too long ago where I kept opening up to the same Bible pages, and I have a Bible that is not worn old. It's in fact, recently I just opened up to Malachi. It's very interesting thing. But I just want to say, though, it keeps opening up. Like, I kept getting the same verses over and over every time I would flip the Bible open. It hasn't happened so much lately, but it did happen for a little while there. And I took them kind of seriously. I thought, this is kind of, strange. I mean, what are the chances? You look at your Bible, if you look at how many pages, now this is a big letter Bible, has 1,940 pages. So the chances that I would open up to the same page over and over and over, it's pretty slim.
Well, yeah. But I mean, like, I actually have a program on my computer that just has the Bible completely on it. What's funny is, like, I had to do that myself because all the places that near me with Bibles, they only sell one thing, King James only version. Like the King James version, and I don't like that version.
Now, I know where you live, so go to the Lifeway over in Brandon. The Lifeway has lots of versions. That's where I got mine. Yeah, so I mean, that's because everyone around me, that seemed to be the only version of the Bible they had was the King James, and I just simply did not like the language. Eventually, I got the NASB version, which is supposedly from a lot of scholars use it. They consider it like if you're not going directly from the interlinear, you would go to the NASB. Yeah, that sounds like a good version.
Yeah, it's considered like, well, I mean, there's I can't remember how they distinguish it. It's like, do you want like word? They'll say, do you want word by word, or do you want like the emphasis on the emotions? Because there's some genres that where an interpretation will work better to emphasize the genre of the what you're listening to. Like there might be moments of satire in the Bible where they might be just making fun, and some versions they'll emphasize that more in the translation.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Let me ask you this. I want to say, now, if you were, put yourself in Jesus's shoes, just for a second, if you were to believe in him, if you thought that he was, and you wanted to convince Derek that he is true, which verse in the Bible you think would be a good one to keep popping up to you?
That is a tough question, really. Personally, like, it would probably be a verse that like no one would expect you to see. Like John 3:16 is a very like that's a Bible verse that everyone knows. So I mean, if I have like no one actually says that they have that thing with Leviticus or anything like that.
Do you think that Leviticus would convince you that Jesus is real?
If I kept opening like Leviticus and it kept on doing that, I might be considerate.
But Jesus isn't. I mean, that's the Old Testament. So.
Oh yeah, I know that, but I'm saying like I mean, it would convince me more in the Judeo-Christian, and around that time frame. But I would probably maybe, trying to think with the one where he says he's the son of like in the Markian account where he says in front of the Pharisees where he says I am the Son of Man, and you will be seeing me at the sitting at the right hand side
of the Mighty One, coming in the clouds of heaven. Yeah. That's a great verse.
Yeah, so I mean, if anything, it'd probably be that one. That would, if anything, if I had the same signs that like I had before, that would maybe more lean me towards it.
So is there anything and I kind of feel like you were given some signs that you've decided that these aren't adequate. Not to ask what would it take to make you think that they were adequate, but I'm wondering, is there a reason why you wouldn't want God to? I mean, if you died today or you died tomorrow, and all of a sudden you're standing in front of Jesus at the pearly gates, would that make you comfortable?
I mean, in some respect, if I died and I seen Jesus, like, I mean, for one, I'd be knowing this would be right, but I'm not. A lot of atheists will say if I seen Jesus right to his face, I would curse him out. They'll say something like that. I said, dude, you would get scared by a linebacker who can do much less damage to you than Jesus can. If I was in front of Jesus, I would probably be like, I wouldn't say I'd be afraid, because that's not really in his nature to be intimidating. I mean, God is intimidating, but Jesus is more of love. But yeah, I would probably obviously I would know I was wrong, and I would say, well, shoot, I was wrong. So I mean, it'd be a very big aha moment to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that I spent, right when I got out of college, probably when I was somewhere around your age, I spent a long time, kind of like you did the way you were raised. I was raised as more of a liberal Christian, and we went to Catholic church, but my parents still are pretty liberal, and they're not the types who have Bibles in the house or anything like that. And my mom's got some crosses on the wall, but that's about it. But I spent 2 decades basically doubting Jesus's. I had lots and lots of doubts, tons of doubts, and so I can see like where you're coming from. Yeah, I just had lots of. I mean, I needed proof. I needed something to happen for me to know. Now, I can honestly say though, had those 3:16s kept showing up, I probably would have taken that much more seriously than you did. But I needed something, and I all of a sudden in my 40s I started getting signs that were beyond question. And so because of that, I feel like God has a personal relationship. I mean, it seems strange. You look at the universe and you say, holy cow, there are 600 trillion planets and stars and all this kind of stuff. It's so huge, we can't even comprehend it. But yet we feel, and it's kind of strange to some people, they say, well, how do you feel that we're this little planet in the Milky Way, the third rock from the sun, why is it that God, who created this vast, ginormous universe, would pay any attention to these little ants on the third rock from the sun? And so I see the deist perspective coming from that, where they say, God is obviously way too beyond us little parts of the thing. But then what's interesting is we look at these situations that we've had where there are a lot of people who claim that they've had some very significant spiritual experiences that cannot be explained through natural terms. And even in other faiths, I mean, we have an abundance of people coming out from Islam countries where they're saying, they've seen Jesus in their dreams and these sorts of things are occurring. So I'm probably more open-minded towards it, where I look at that and I take it very seriously. And I think,
well, I mean, my whole thing with spiritual experiences is like, I mean, I'm not like the kind of guy that just dismisses them out of hand. Like some deists will do that, which I do not support them at all. When they do that, I mean, I just personally believe like a personal experience is good enough for the person. I would think it gives a person who justification. Like I would say, like William Lane.
Oh shoot! Wait, say that again, because your sound just went out. At least to me, it did. Darn it! Try that one more time, Derek. I don't know if it's just my sound or if it's you. Shoot. Can you? I don't know, Craig. I know Craig. I see Craig in the chat. Craig, can you hear Derek? Because my sound seems to have gone out.
Hello.
Oh wait, now I hear you.
All right. Yeah, the Reformed. He has the epistemology stance.
Try that, Derek. Try it one more time. I don't know if maybe you just kind of move around or move your computer, kind of maybe shake it up or something. Somehow, okay, now I hear you again.
All right. Yeah, it might be something to do with my internet connection. But yeah, it happens to William Lane Craig's Reformed epistemology, I believe, where he says, one can be rationally justified in believing in God based on personal experience. So, I mean, I can sort of understand that position. I mean, I don't completely agree with it, but I mean, I can wrap my head around someone can get in that position. I just, but I find it like, we have Buddhists who have spiritual experiences, and Buddhists don't even believe in God. So that's why, I mean, I always sort of have doubts when it comes to personal experiences, because there seems to be a lot of them, and from people that don't even believe in God.
Well, Buddhists, I mean, there's different sects of Buddhism. So yes, there is a sect that they're basically atheists. But there are some Buddhists who do believe they do believe in spirituality and spiritual experiences, and there is a higher power according to some sects of Buddhism.
Some of them have more of like where they might believe in spirits that they can communicate with. Some sects I know, they have just they might believe in ancestral worship or something like that, where they believe that you can talk upon your ancestors. Which to me, that'd be frightening, in some ways, because now I'm getting my great grandmother in here, and I only imagine like that would how like, because eventually you're gonna run into like, how far back does this go, and when you get to a certain level, because given like millions of years, do you ever get to the point where you just have ancestors that get pushed off to the side? They're just no longer intervening.
My pastor said something really interesting, and it's true, and it's actually very sad. But he said that we're 3 generations away from being forgotten. I mean, unless we're very famous people, which the vast majority of us are not and will never be, we are 3 generations away. So, and you think about it, I look at my great-great-grandmother, I have no idea about her, or my great-great-grandfather. So it's
what's
very
funny
sad,
about me is I actually know a little bit about my ancestry, because it turns out that I'm related to, trying to think of what, he signed the Declaration. He was one of the people that signed the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, I can't, damn it, I had his name in my head, but he was like he was like a governor or like something of he had something to do with Pittsburgh. Oh yeah, William Hooper was his name.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so I mean, apparently I learned that from my grandfather, where he said we can trace our lineage all the way back to William Hooper, who signed the Declaration of Independence. And what's funny with me is like, what was funny is I was saying, oh wow, I got a rich guy in my family. I only had to go back so many generations to.
That's funny. Now I lost your voice again there, Derek. Are you there?
I hear you.
Okay, now I hear you. Yeah, now I just heard you.
All right.
You only had to go. So you have a rich guy. No, I have someone from the Mayflower. If I go far enough back on one side, but most of my relatives are either farmers or teachers. It was good for me to go into teaching. Farmers or teachers, or I have a hotel owner over in Germany. I've got the wealth from my family comes from Germany. So. Drats, we're losing you again. I don't know if it's, the weather here is kind of bad. I don't know if your internet connection has to do with that.
It could be something to do with that. Hello?
Oh, yeah, I got you now.
Yeah. My bad at times. It has its days where it works, but for some reason, when I go on Google Hangouts, it always goes back and forth.
Yeah, are you on Bright House by chance?
No. I can't remember what it's actually called. Cricket. Yeah, Cricket's the host.
Yeah, I'm on Bright House. Mine is shaky. I mean, my internet's half the time not very good, so I totally understand.
Oh yeah, well, Bright House is expensive from my perspective. Like, I was on Bright House for a long time, and like Cricket, they had a new plan, and that's how I came to have my internet as I have it now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool. So Derek, let's go ahead and let's wrap it up. I want to see if we can. I think we had a lot of nice points today, and you said a lot of good things, and it's been very interesting to listen to a deist perspective, because I've never had a deist on here. So I really enjoy the fact that you shared your point of view. You want to give any parting points, or also would like to share where people can find you?
Yeah. I believe that people can find me on my channel, BrassWisdom. I'm currently in the process of doing a video on the Dark Ages. Trademark, because a lot of historians don't even like using the term Dark Ages anymore. And, you can also find me on the Red Pill Religion. I do videos for them, with them occasionally. So, yeah. You can always find me there, and you can find me on Twitter under BrassWisdom, the same. And yeah, I had a very good time. I felt we had a lot of good conversation here.
Yeah, I agree, and I find your perspective fascinating, and I really liked the 316 part. I might start sending you subliminal 316 messages just for fun.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Derek, and thank you everyone who came to listen today, and really appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that Derek shared a lot of his experiences. I love the whole story of 316. I like the fact that you've actually studied up on lots of different historical perspectives. Like you said, you looked into Thomas Paine, you looked into other people in history, and you developed your theory that way and your belief system that way. And so I think that's a good way to go about it. And I think that also speaks to the fact that you're a lifelong learner, you're very curious, and that can never go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
We still have the shaky internet here.
My mom for education, and I've always been my own dedication as well.
Good. So dedication. I caught the dedication. Can you say that one more time?
I said my mom always pushed my education.
Oh, educate. Yeah, good.
And I became a lifelong learner in part because of her, and because I like it in general.
That's good. That's good. That can never go wrong. So thank you, everyone who came on here. I hope you like or subscribe, and we will see you later. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. Thank you.